Hello everyone and welcome to Book My Therapy. Today we have on board Sumit Rai, a licensed mental health professional with over a decade of work experience, and he has a master's in social work and certifications in cognitive behavioral therapy and trauma informed care. As a primary therapist at Counseling for Men, he serves the most underserved community, men. Sumit's focus to build profound connections, not only with others but with yourself as well. Join us in this conversation to learn about their holistic approach towards an improved mental well being. Welcome to Book My Therapy, Sumit.
Thanks, Neha. I really appreciate you having me here today. It's always a pleasure.
So, I have a few questions for you.
Sure.
In your experience, what are some effective strategies or practices that individuals can incorporate into their daily lives to promote mental well being, especially during challenging times?
That's a great question, actually, right? So I know there's a lot of different approaches people usually take when they go to counseling. But when it comes to for everybody, the general population, whether we are interested in seeking professional services such as counseling or not, the one is looking at patterns, right? We often don't recognize it takes around 90 days to build a solid pattern, whether the pattern is negative or positive. So it's all about looking at what we have that is good for us, what we have is bad, and trying to teeter totter slowly back into a good equilibrium. So the strategies that I would say is one, looking at your own patterns, which goes under the CBT framework. I'm looking at consistency and commitment and gaining better patterns. And I know sometimes it sounds like a foreign concept, but if you have ever learned to brush your teeth, if you have ever learned to drive a car, if you've ever learned a new route from your work, school, or home to your friend's house or to back home, that's because we have done that over 3 months, right? So it's just about consistency and learning new patterns is one really key effective strategy that I would state is important for everybody, whether you're choosing to go to counseling or not.
So moving to next section, this is about couples counseling. In
Okay.
your practice, what are some common patterns or challenges you have observed in couples, and what strategies do you find most effective in helping them navigate
Mhm.
these issues and build stronger relationships?
Okay, that's a really good question, actually. A common word that's often thrown around, Neha, maybe you agree, maybe a lot of people have heard this term, is communication is a key to a relationship. However, a lot of us, don't really know what that means, right? There's passive communication, assertive communication, aggressive communication. And a lot of times, because of miseducation, we feel like when we're being aggressive, we're being assertive. Or when we're being passive, that's assertive. That clarification is very key in relationships. Another big thing that I would suggest or recommend is looking at boundaries. Another really famous word thrown out, boundaries. Let's hold a boundary here. Let's hold a boundary there. However, there are many types of boundaries, right? One, physical boundary. Couples need their own space sometimes. One, intellectual boundary. If I don't like liberals, if I don't like conservatives, if I don't like Republicans, I don't like this, if I don't like that, why are we talking about it? Is there certain topics every time I talk to my wife or my partner that often gets us in an argument? If that's the case, we have to hold back on those boundaries, right? And these boundaries don't only mean between the partners themselves, extended family, right? So we have to look at intellectual boundaries. We have to look at sexual boundaries. We have to look at financial boundaries. We have to look at emotional boundaries. All of that plus communication is key just to getting your trajectory into a place where we can say your relationships even beginning to look healthy.
Interesting.
It is. It can be very interesting. And often we're so busy, right? We have no time to think about it. But yeah, it can be very interesting.
Yeah, especially because when you are with your partner, you think that we are one, we are a team. But then, where to draw the line is something that all of us need to learn. That's
100%. And let's be honest, we all come from cultures, whether we're here in the West or in the East, where we used to have a lot of codependency, right? We're dependent on our wives, we're dependent on our husbands or a partner to partner, but we don't have that individual kind of strength to accomplish those on our own. So you'll notice a lot of times when we don't have good boundaries and we are over codependent, it only affects us when we're older and people we loved start passing away. What do you do when you build a life of patterns of not having boundaries and not being dependent on yourself? It has to be a balance. A partner is a partner, but we're also our own individual that come together for a common goal, right?
Well said. Thank you.
No problem.
Um, the second section being about addiction.
Okay.
So, what are some key signs or indicators that someone might be developing an unhealthy addiction to video games or social media? And how can
Hmm.
individuals or families approach addressing these behaviors in a supportive manner?
Good question. And this is something that affects all ages, all cultures. Technology is great when it's used right, but it also can be very detrimental, right, to our mental health, emotional health, self-esteem, etc. When it comes to video games and let's say social media, overuse is your priorities not being met, whether that's self-care, personal hygiene, eating right, socialization, going to work, etc. Are we waking up in the morning thinking of that external stimuli to give us that dopamine, to give us that happy chemical, or is it coming from within? Social media is great to connect with people. Video games are great to de stress. But if our day to day priorities are not being met and we're over consumed or over worried, I should rather say, on looking at the video game, connecting through social media, it's going to do nothing but build that dependency again, right? Looking at the negative pattern we talked before, when you're going to feel like you need that social media, you need the video games to have that happy chemical at an all-time high. It's almost like giving your options or let's say giving your strength to something else, right? Where it's not coming from within anymore. Sometimes we need those outlets, but we can't over rely on those outlets either. So the biggest thing I would say is looking at your patterns once again. Are we not meeting our priorities? And if anybody who is going through such a situation, it doesn't mean you have to stop social media or stop video games. It's about that harm reduction, right? If we're doing something that's negative, how do we gain something that's positive and slowly go back to balance? It's not about the abstinence approach. It's more about harm reducing so you have better hobbies, more healthier patterns, just so you can be fully equipped to deal with your regular day to day priorities and tasks.
Interesting. So for people like me who are like all by ourselves, so how do we measure or monitor, when it is starting to get addictive and up to a point that it is hampering or becoming a hassle for us so to continue our daily lives? Like,
Sure, your sleep quality is going down, your eating quality is going down, you're missing work, you can't meet work expectations, you're late to work, you no longer want to socialize, you're more isolated. I would look at all these things, right? And if it's something, let me give you an example. You know, sometimes when you eat too much chocolate, let's say on Halloween, for example, something like an apple tastes like cardboard. When an apple has enough sugar, right? But just when you have over kind of giving your body that expectation of certain stimuli, feeling like going back to a regular baseline seems odd. That's just because we built that pattern, right? So I would really tell people look at your sleep patterns, your hygiene, your daily task for living that we are not accomplishing. And if something like social media or video games are getting in the way of that, relationships, work, personal health, sleep, eating, physical health, then I would say it deserves to have a deeper discussion about video games and social media.
well said. What are some effective strategies or interventions for individuals struggling with excessive video games or social media use that you would
The biggest one is harm reduction. Harm reduction is a strategy that's used in other types of addictions, whether that's alcohol, whether it's addiction with nicotine, addiction with cannabis, etc. And harm reduction is that teeter-totter approach, right? So we recognize we have one thing that's negative, and it's maybe at a high. And maybe as we gain the positives, the negatives can drop. So let's say start getting active, eating healthier, socializing more, going to the gym, etc. When we pick up those hobbies, we can either get video games to an equilibrium, or it can even go down a bit because we're not over dependent on it. So the tools and the strategies that would be used for video game or social media addiction, if one identifies that's what they're living with, harm reduction would be the best approach.
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
So the next question is about family counseling. What are some effective approaches or techniques you find beneficial when working with individuals who are navigating conflicts with their families? And that could be due to life transition, career decisions, or marrying someone, or are married to someone, financial decisions.
Good question. Good question. So not only what we kind of looked at earlier, patterns are going to be important, right? Very important. Communication is going to be important, very important. Boundaries are going to be important, but also individual traits. What I mean by that is a lot of times families, and this is looking at attachment levels and attachment theory perspectives. A lot of times families, we either may be too rigid, or we may be too porous, or some of us can be healthy. Now, what does a rigid trait look like? It's people that are closed off, very protective of personal information. They don't really want to socialize. They almost look like they don't like social interaction or they don't like communication. So that's rigid. Some family members can be like that. Some family members over-involved, always asking questions, always feeling like at the end of the day, if I do not help Neha or I don't help Sumit, they may not like me the same level. Always over-involved, almost like the superheroes, right? Always trying to save everybody. Then there's a healthy level of traits where we know when to be rigid, we know when to be porous, we know when to ask for help, we know when to keep it for ourselves, etc. Families work great in collaboration, but the individualism is very important too. So, and a lot of times it's different because we can say the West has a lot of great stuff, this Western ideology. It may be independent, maybe over independent. Maybe the Eastern ideologies has great stuff. Maybe they can be collaborative, maybe over collaborative. What happens when you have too much of this? We get codependent. What happens when you have too much independence? You get isolated, which can lead to depressive symptoms. So it's all about that balance. Very, very important to balance your traits, rigid, porous traits, healthy traits, looking at boundaries, looking at especially communication, and trying to balance perspectives, right? At the end of the day, we are social creatures. We need that socialization. It's a part of us at the end of the day, but we also need time to reflect and be mindful so we can work on our inner selves.
Interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. We don't think about this. Me and you are fortunate where we can have these conversations, but a lot of people are busy. What do? We wake up in the morning, hear the alarm, go on autopilot, right? So we need to sometimes be mindful and think about our stress system so it doesn't over implode, causing burnout, causing abusive language, right? Causing emotional abuse, causing financial abuse. All this happens in families sometimes, unfortunately. So we just have to be aware of the small things so they don't spiral into bigger concerns later.
So does that even mean that there are attachment styles within the family as well? Because
100%. 100%. We all have different sometimes attachment styles, right? We may be raised under a certain ideology, but let's say if you and I are raised in a household As soon as we leave the door, we're open to a plethora of knowledge, of education, of different personalities. It can happen through social media, television, or some kind of broadcast programming, right? It can happen. Even though people are from the same household, they can have different point of views, different attachment styles, different traits when it comes to boundaries, and even different languages of love at the end of the day, right? When it comes to a family member, maybe that child doesn't want physical touch. Maybe the child wants quality time. When it comes to one partner, maybe they want more words of affirmation. And maybe one partner wants more acts of service. It's all about learning what individuals want. I think as families, we sometimes discount, yeah, they're our family, but they're also a relationship, right? I'm in the relationship with my wife or partner. I'm in the relationship with my son. The type of relationship is different, but it's still a relationship. By default, becoming a parent or dealing with children who go to difficult areas is not going to be something we have naturally. Sometimes you have to learn it because we're all products of unlearning and relearning, right? Maybe some stuff we learned in our past wasn't too well, so we polish it up a bit. So just about figuring out what your child needs, what your family needs, what your partner needs, and what you need, and communicating. There's not going to be one box for all family. Unfortunately, it would be easier, but it's just not built that way, right? So we all have to be a bit more extra aware, I would say.
Hmm. When we were mentioning about you and I, if we were raised in the same household, and once we walk to the door, there is a plethora of information that we are exposed to, and
Yes.
we could be different personalities. I was thinking about my sister.
Okay.
So she and I, even though we are like have the same exact same conditioning, values, principles, we
Hmm.
are very different.
100%. 100%. Well said, right? And that's also the beauty of humans at the end of the day. You'll recognize we'll have wonderful teachings, but we have the ability to absorb knowledge ourselves, right? At the end of the day, and become our own person. So yeah, yeah. What you said is very well, and I think a lot of people will probably relate to that now.
Well, that now leads to the last section, which is now this one is for mental health professionals
Yes.
um, who are listening to this podcast. It's about
Okay.
starting your own practice. So,
Hmm.
what advice or key lessons would you offer to individuals looking to embark on their journey of starting their own counseling or therapy practice? So, for example, are there any specific strategies or crucial considerations you'd recommend?
This is good. This is good. Rather than as strategies, I have one point of view that I would like to share with private clinicians and private counselors, etc. 100% people who are in this field probably know we need registration depending on each state or province we are in. They know we need education just to be able to get that registration. However, I think it's a big responsibility. So therefore, the counselor should have 100% commitment if they want to go into this type of work. They deserve a well-rounded counselor. They deserve someone with a certain level of experience. And hey, if you want to get into private counseling, good. I think we need more private counselors, more different cultures, diverse genders, etc. But we can always have a point where our commitment should be to learn. So when we're talking to our clients in private practice, we're not learning based off their concerns, right? At the end, people who choose to come to us choose a counselor, say this is someone I'm connecting with, and I want them to help collaborate with me so I can learn more tools. That person should be well equipped. So as counselors, we need to continue doing our own learning beyond the formalities, beyond the provincial state guidelines, beyond obtaining diplomas, degrees, etc. We need to always learn, right? This world is continuing to change. Stuff changes so quick. The language you and I used to use when we were younger is completely different now. You have to respect that. The ideologies we've learned are different now. So you have to respect that as well. So when it comes to private counseling, starting your own practice, have you had experience working with other organizations, other collectives, to a point where you're 100% equipped with the knowledge to offer this private service. That's the actually big takeaway I would give to people wanting to start their own practice. 100% all the other things, formalities when it comes to just the legality side of it is very important, very, very important. But the person should be 100% equipped and ready to give their commitment as well, because it's a big deal often when it comes to our population who's so closed off for someone to be vulnerable with you. That's a big deal. And if they're willing to be vulnerable with you, with the notion this person may, or at least should, have a bit of the tools that I need, we should honor that back, in my opinion.
Very important. Well said. Thank you for sharing.
And no problem. Thank you for doing this, right? You're doing a great, great service. And I really appreciate you even setting something like this up. But this type of conversation, or sorry, these type of conversation definitely has to happen.
Thank you.
No problem.
So, Sumit, I have a question for you. So, why did you choose to emphasize on counseling for men?
Good question. Good question. One, again, you said it earlier, and thank you for that, Neha. Just to reiterate, in counseling for men, I still speak to everybody, anybody who's interested. The reason why we emphasized counseling for men, because men are seen as a underserved community. Often they've been socialized, for lack of better words, just to be like workhorses for our community, go out and work, etc. And they were never socialized to talk about vulnerability. And what happens a lot of times when men aren't healed or they have a lot of, let's say, built up frustration, it often gets taken out on their family, their wives, their sisters, other members of the community, other men, etc. So that is a reason why that is emphasized. And honestly, in all honesty, a lot of times the referral sources, the people who give me a call, Neha, and state, I'm interested for your services, are women. It's a woman calling saying, hey, I know my brother, my husband, my dad, my uncle, my male best friend, they would not go to counseling if they didn't have a comfortable space, emphasizing on the counseling for men. So even though the practice is almost advertised, or it's better words labeled that way, over 40 to 45% of my clientele are either couples, including male and female couples, or their referral source are the women in their life who realize the stigma placed on men going to counseling just makes it difficult for their loved one or partner or brother, etc., to seek those helps and services. So just like similar to, people don't know this. Do you know what YMCA stands for?
Not really.
So a lot of people don't know. And YMCA is a very big organization. It stands for Young Men's Christians Association. Right? Earlier, when there was such a need after the world wars, etc., a lot of men needed somewhere to go just to have a place of conversation, a place of healing, a place of support. But over time, we all know YMCA accepts everybody, right?
Yes.
Right? They accept everyone, they don't discriminate. But they started off due to a very particular social concern and cause that wasn't being met. Similarly, counseling for men, even though it emphasizes when it comes to the healing of men, we accept everybody. Men are just so underserved. So we're trying to normalize the word counseling and men in one sentence. It's a rare sentence, right? We don't really see that a lot often. So trying to take that stigma away just from that line alone, I feel like it's slowly helping change the stigma for men going to counseling.
Well said. Yes, I do completely agree when it comes to, asking for help. Sorry, not help. So in the self-sufficiency culture, it becomes like very looked down upon. Well,
Yes.
men, I only can imagine, tend to think that, am I weak to seek therapy, or can I not solve my
Yeah,
problems?
it's true. It's true. 100%, right? Men are very unfortunately socialized like that. right? And it's a very difficult thing because it not only affects them, but it affects everybody in their life, all genders, all ages, work health, social health, etc. So we're just trying to do our service to the community and combat that little by little as best as possible.
If you like this episode, please hit the like and subscribe button and let me know in the comment section if you have any feedback or review for us. This will help us reach maximum number of people and create awareness about men's mental health. Thank you. Bye.